For Savannah Guthrie, one of the most recognized faces in American morning television, that moment came without warning. Her daughter, her little girl, and suddenly, the woman who had stood strong through presidential press conferences, breaking news, and live television for decades, was just a mother, terrified, helpless, praying. What happened to Annie Guthrie shook Savannah to her very core. It forced her to step away from everything she had built. It forced her to confront a truth she had been quietly carrying for years. That behind the polished smile and the bright studio lights, there was a family facing something deeply painful, deeply private, and deeply human. But here is what most people never knew. This wasn't the first time Savannah had stood in a hospital, heart pounding, fighting back tears for someone she loved. This wasn't the first health scare that had quietly threatened to unravel everything she had worked so hard to build. There was a pattern, a hidden thread of fear and faith running through Savannah Guthrie's life that her audience never fully saw. And tonight, we are going to tell you all of it, because the real story of Savannah Guthrie is not about morning television, that it is about love, loss, survival, and a mother who absolutely refused to break. Stay with us, because what you are about to hear will change the way you see Savannah Guthrie forever. If you have ever turned on the television on a weekday morning in America, chances are you already know her face, that warm smile, those bright, steady eyes, that voice, calm, confident, and somehow both deeply professional and deeply personal at the same time. Savannah Guthrie is not just a television host. She is an institution. For over a decade, she has co-anchored NBC's Today Show, one of the most watched morning programs in the entire history of American television. She has interviewed presidents and pop stars. She has covered Olympic Games and national tragedies. She has sat at that iconic desk through some of the most defining and devastating moments in modern history, and she has never flinched. She is a lawyer, a journalist, a best-selling author, a mother, a wife, a woman who somehow manages to carry an entire broadcast on her shoulders every single morning while the rest of the country is still drinking their first cup of coffee. But Savannah Guthrie's story is so much more than her resume could ever capture, because behind every confident broadcast, there were private battles that her viewers rarely glimpsed. Behind every polished sentence was a woman quietly navigating fear, grief, health crises, and the relentless pressure of being a public figure while desperately trying to protect what mattered most: her family. Her children, Vale and Charlie, her husband Mike Feldman, her faith, her sense of self in a world that constantly demanded she be something for everyone else. And then came the moment involving Annie, the moment that broke through every carefully constructed wall and reminded the entire country that Savannah Guthrie was not just a television personality. She was a mother first. Always a mother first. To truly understand what happened and why it mattered so deeply, you have to understand where Savannah came from, because her strength did not rise fully formed. It was built slowly and painfully through a life that was far harder than most people ever realized. Savannah Clark Guthrie was born on December 27, 1971, in Melbourne, Australia, where her father was stationed temporarily for work. But she grew up in Tucson, Arizona, in a quiet, grounded, deeply loving household that was about to be shattered in the most irreversible way. When Savannah was just 16 years old, her father, Charles Guthrie, died, suddenly, tragically, and the world as she knew it simply ended. She has spoken about this loss with careful, measured honesty over the years. The way grief doesn't announce itself neatly, the way it settles into your bones and quietly changes the architecture of who you are. Her father's death forced a young Savannah to grow up faster than she ever should have had to. It forced her to become someone who understood, at a bone-deep level, that life is fragile. That the people you love can be taken without warning. That no amount of preparation, no amount of success, no amount of control over your own life can fully protect you from losing the ones who matter most. That moment planted something deep inside Savannah Guthrie that would shape everything that followed: a fierce, almost desperate appreciation for the people she loved, a need to hold them close, a quiet, ever-present terror of losing them again. She channeled her pain into ambition. She threw herself into school, into debate, into journalism, into law. She earned her law degree from Georgetown University. She passed the bar. She built the kind of credentials that commanded respect in any room she walked into. But Savannah Guthrie was not meant for a courtroom. She was meant for something far bigger and far more visible. Her path into journalism began with the kind of grinding, unglamorous work that most people never see and rarely talk about. She reported for local television stations. She covered stories that nobody else wanted. She drove herself relentlessly, knowing that talent alone was never going to be enough, that she had to outwork everyone in the room just to earn a seat at the table. And slowly, through sheer persistence and undeniable skill, she earned it. In 2008, she joined NBC News as a correspondent. Her legal background made her an exceptional journalist, precise, analytical, and able to cut through complexity in a way that felt completely effortless to viewers at home. By 2011, she was named co-host of the Today Show alongside Matt Lauer, and suddenly, Savannah Guthrie was everywhere. America woke up with her every morning. They trusted her. They admired her. They felt, somehow, like they knew her. She covered the 2012 and 2016 presidential elections with authority and poise. She moderated debates. She broke major stories. She sat across from some of the most powerful people in the world and asked the questions that nobody else was willing to ask out loud. But what happened next changed everything. Because just as Savannah Guthrie reached the pinnacle of her career, her personal life began to quietly, urgently catch up with her. She was in her 40s. She had spent so many years pouring everything into her career that she had nearly missed the other things she desperately wanted: love, children, a home that felt like a home. And then, against all odds, she found it. She married political consultant Mike Feldman in 2014, and at 42 years old, she welcomed her daughter Vale Guthrie into the world. 2 years later, her son Charlie arrived. Savannah Guthrie finally had everything she had ever wanted. But the universe, it seemed, was not finished testing her. The Today Show has never been a simple or comfortable place. Behind the warm set and the cheerful theme music, it is a high-pressure, intensely competitive broadcast environment where everything is always on the line. And Savannah Guthrie has navigated more turbulence inside those walls than most viewers ever realized. The departure of Matt Lauer in 2017, following serious and deeply disturbing misconduct allegations, sent shockwaves through the entire show and through everyone connected to it. Savannah was the one who had to tell America what had happened. She sat on that couch with tears visibly forming in her eyes and announced to millions of viewers that her longtime co-anchor was gone, that the man she had worked alongside for years had done things that could not be defended or excused. It was one of the most painful and difficult moments of her entire professional life. Few people fully understood this hidden truth, that Savannah had to deliver that news live, with almost no preparation, processing her own shock and grief and confusion in real time while the cameras rolled and the whole country watched. She did it with grace. She did it with honesty. But it cost her something real, something she never fully talked about publicly. And then came the personal health scare that changed Savannah in a way that no professional crisis ever could. In 2016, Savannah Guthrie was injured in an accident at her home. She suffered a retinal detachment in her right eye, a condition that threatened her vision permanently. She underwent emergency surgery, and for a terrifying stretch of time, nobody knew whether she would regain full sight in that eye. For a woman who reads teleprompters, studies documents, and communicates visually for a living, the possibility of losing her eyesight was not just frightening, it was existential. She recovered, slowly, carefully, gratefully, but not without scars, not without a new and profound understanding of how quickly everything you depend on can simply be taken away. And still, somehow, the hardest moment had not yet arrived. People who know Savannah Guthrie describe her in remarkably consistent terms: genuine, warm, hilarious in the most unexpected and delightful way, deeply faithful, and fiercely, almost protectively devoted to the people she loves. Her husband Mike is her anchor, steady, supportive, and deliberately private in a world where privacy is nearly impossible to protect. Their partnership is built on mutual respect and a quiet, shared understanding of what actually matters. Her children, Vale and Charlie, are her entire world. Full stop. She has spoken publicly and beautifully about the experience of becoming a mother later in life, about the particular, overwhelming kind of gratitude that fills you when you have wanted something for so long, and you finally hold it in your arms, about the way her children completely rewired her, made her softer in some places, and stronger in others. All at the same time, Savannah Guthrie is also, genuinely and without performance, a woman of deep Christian faith. It is not something she displays for an audience. It is something she lives quietly, privately, and honestly. When things have been difficult, and they have been difficult many times, her faith has been the foundation underneath her feet when everything else was shaking. She has talked about prayer in a way that feels completely unpolished and real. Not the faith of someone following a script, the faith of someone who has genuinely, desperately needed it, who has sat in the dark and leaned on it when there was nothing else left to lean on. And the darkness, when it finally came for her family, was deeper than anything she had faced before. By the time Savannah Guthrie moved into her early 50s, she carried a perspective on life that most people spend an entire lifetime trying to earn. She had seen grief up close at an age when most teenagers were worried about homework. She had navigated career chaos and public scrutiny. She had survived a health crisis that threatened one of her most essential senses. She had processed trauma professionally while the whole country watched her face. She had also watched the television industry transform dramatically around her. The morning show format that had defined her career was evolving in ways nobody could fully predict. Audiences were shifting. The competition for attention had never been more brutal or more unforgiving. And Savannah, who had once seemed like an unshakable, permanent fixture of American mornings, found herself in a media landscape where nothing and no one was truly guaranteed. But Savannah Guthrie had never been someone who defined herself purely by what she did for a living. She had learned that lesson, too young and too painfully to ever forget it, because when your father dies at 16, you understand something about impermanence that other people spend decades carefully avoiding. You understand that the only things that truly matter are the people in the room with you right now. And that truth landed on her harder than ever before when Annie needed her. Here is what happened. Savannah Guthrie's daughter, Vale, whom the family lovingly and privately calls Annie, faced a serious health situation that required Savannah to step back entirely from her public role and be fully, completely present as a mother. The exact medical details were kept private, as they should be, because some things belong only to family, and no audience, no matter how loyal or loving, has a right to every corner of a person's pain. But what Savannah chose to share publicly was enough to break the heart of anyone who heard it. She stepped away from the Today Show. She asked for time. She chose her child over everything else, over the cameras, over the contracts, over the weight of expectation carried by millions of viewers who had depended on her familiar, reassuring face every single morning. And in doing so, Savannah Guthrie did something quietly and profoundly radical. She reminded every parent watching that no job, no matter how prestigious, no matter how visible, no matter how hard you work to earn, it is more important than being present for your child in their moment of need. She reminded every mother who had ever felt guilty for choosing family over career that the choice was never something to be ashamed of. It was right. It was always right. This moment would define her in ways that 1,000 television appearances never could have, because here was Savannah Guthrie, the woman who had reported through tragedy, who had anchored broadcasts through national crises, who had sat across from world leaders without flinching, sitting in a hospital room, holding her daughter's hand, and simply being a mother. No cameras. No script. No audience. Just love. And when the story quietly became public, the response was overwhelming and immediate. Viewers flooded social media with messages of support and tenderness. Colleagues spoke about Savannah's strength with a kind of reverence that went far beyond professional admiration, because everyone who has ever loved a child Everyone who has ever sat in a hospital waiting room and bargained silently with God for good news understood exactly what Savannah Guthrie was going through. They had lived some version of it themselves, and they were deeply grateful that someone as visible and as trusted as Savannah was willing to be honest about how hard it truly was. Fame is a strange and seductive thing. It convinces you, slowly and quietly, that the brightest moments of your life are the ones that happened in front of an audience. But Savannah Guthrie's story tells us something different. It tells us that the most important moments, the ones that actually define us, that strip away every performance and every pretense, and reveal who we truly are, those moments happen in the quiet places. In hospital rooms. In whispered prayers. In the grip of a small hand inside a larger one. Savannah Guthrie has given America so much over the years. She has informed us and challenged us and made us laugh. She has helped us process some of the most difficult and disorienting chapters of our national story. And she has done it with a steadiness that felt like a gift. But the greatest thing she has ever given us is something simpler and more lasting than any broadcast. It is her honesty. Her willingness to say, even without words, I am not just a television host. I am a daughter who lost her father far too soon. I am a mother who would surrender everything she has built for her children without a second thought. I am a woman who is afraid sometimes, who cries when nobody is watching, who prays because she needs to and not because it looks good. That kind of honesty is rare in public life. That kind of courage is rarer still. Savannah Guthrie will return to our screens. She always does, because she is made from something genuinely durable, from grief and faith and love and the particular, unbreakable toughness that only comes from surviving the things you were never completely sure you could survive. But when she comes back, we hope you see her a little differently now, not just as a television anchor holding down the morning, but as a woman who has lived fully and honestly, who has loved fiercely and without reservation, who has chosen, every single time the choice was placed in front of her, to put the people she loves above every other thing in her life. That is not a television story. That is a human story. And human stories, told with honesty and with heart, are always the ones that last forever.